Good morning, afternoon and evening, specimen and speci women. Today is Tuesday. We are about to get a reset for this week in NA and also tomorrow for EU. This is the I am too lazy to set up a green screen episode. Today also for the record is the 835th anniversary of the beginning of the siege of Jerusalem. Now there have been quite a few sieges of Jerusalem, so which siege exactly? Yes, this one, pretty much likely the only one you know about, this siege right here, which wasn't even a good one. You know, it lasted 12 days, there was barely any fighting, it was already a doom situation anyways. So while not a very epic one, it was definitely the most known of the sieges of Jerusalem. So for today, we're not talking about sieges, we are talking about the clumping together of a whole bunch of news from the Dragonflight beta, which include changes to classes and specs, sure, but also a few interesting things I thought were funny or curious, or perhaps they simply had no space, no room to be fit into any of our previous videos. So now I'm taking them all together right before we get a new build of the beta, which is likely to come in the next couple of days. Wednesday to Thursday is when we get new builds from the beta, which means we get new info, particularly about the classes and specs and whatnot. So right before then, which I know we will be busy covering all of that stuff, we are going to gather together all of these other news in one video. So let's just start first with the change to the classes and specs in the beta of the next reset, so like tomorrow. There are going to be the talents for the Paladin and the Monk, specifically Holy Paladin and the General Tree of Monk that we have covered before. Most of the changes we have covered them before. The one for the Monk, the standout change for the Monk was to give them Expel Harm baseline. So now Paralysis has been moved earlier up the tree to make it easier for all of the Monk specs to pick it up. And then the Holy Paladin one, once again, more and more changes to this Holy Paladin tree, trying to make the caster version work at the same time as the melee version, the one we have right now, which I'm still definitely not a fan of. Then, besides these two minor changes, at the very least because we covered them already, the one that is for today is for the Balanced Druid. Because while we haven't gotten a blue post from Blizzard, nowadays in the beta we have quite often messages and announcements from the developers, so perhaps we could have expected something to be said about this, but we haven't yet. So maybe there is a chance, this is like a total mistake, right? It's not guaranteed to happen, but there has been the data mining for this incoming beta build, which includes Wild Mushroom for Balanced Druid. For those who don't remember, or perhaps they weren't even born, Wild Mushroom came to be a thing in Cataclysm, and then existed from Cataclysm throughout Mists, and then went into Worlds of Draenor, and then wasn't, you know, part of the big great pruning of Warlords. As we entered Legion, many things were pruned for many classes and specs. Wild Mushrooms also was one of the victims of this pruning, and therefore was missed for at this point 3 expansions, so 6 something years since we have seen Wild Mushrooms for the last time. Now the change of this magical mushroom is quite not the same as what we left it all those years ago. The arming time of Wild Mushroom is not 6 seconds, it's just 2 seconds, and also from this data-mined tooltip of the spell, it has 3 charges from the get-go. So it does seem like it is less of a planning type of ability and rather just a 2 seconds delayed explosion, pretty much. The spell power is 200% spell power damage, which is decent. It's a decent amount of spell power. If you want some comparisons, that's about 2 fireballs. Yeah, that's about 2 fireball sort of damage. That's what 200% spell power damage is for this Wild Mushroom. Now, the tooltip is still quite raw, so we don't know if it's 200% spell power damage to all enemies, how many enemies, when does it cap? Does it cap at 6 targets and then less damage after that? Does it cap at 8 targets? Is the damage spread or is it per enemy? We don't know. We just know that there is a data mining for this new ability, and also what makes it not certain but much more likely for this one to be a thing is that there has also been the data mining for the actual talent for the Balanced Druid 3 that goes together with this. The empowerment, which is the fungal growth talent, Enemies struck by wild mushrooms are damaged for an additional 70% over 8 seconds, and then they also get slowed. Slow, which was also one of the features of the wild mushroom talent for Balanced Druid. What I enjoy about this is that the current main annoying weakness of Balanced Druid, if you were to look at it as a whole, is AoE damage. Everyone's got different issues. For balance, it's definitely AoE. So this is helping. This is going to help the AoE of Balanced Druid, which for the moment has been relegated for quite a while now to just be Starfall. Yes, Druid is getting a whole lot of rework in Dragonflight with the whole mastery and the eclipse changing, etc, etc. But we already have one of the changes for the AoE, which is spammable multicasting Starfalls, rather than this current version of Starfall in Shadowlands, where you click it once and then you have nothing to do in AoE for 10 seconds with your astral power. So that was already an improvement compared to what we currently have in Shadowlands. And now we also have wild mushrooms, which is still a good addition for your AoE damage as a Balanced Druid. Going back for a second to Shadowlands, not because I want to talk about what's happening now, the expansion is over, who cares. I wanted to look at this for a comparison to what could or should happen in Dragonflight, which is this thing right here. These are colors and bars we have seen before. These are the percentages of completion for the different keys in Mythic Plus. TLDR, the bigger the bar, the easier the key is, and then the smaller the bar, the harder it is because there are less players completing them. We looked at this once it launched. In the first couple of weeks of Season 4, this was the result, which is, as you can see, a disaster. It's not very balanced. There are clearly here, as we can see, some dungeons way harder than others. Namely, in this case, we had the 2 Karazhan dungeons being very difficult, way overtuned compared to the rest, but then also Grimrail Depot and Iron Docks weren't too easy either. That was the problem 6 weeks ago. 5 to 6 weeks ago, at the start of this patch. And now you can see that the situation is much more balanced. Yes, you have a couple of outliers, right? Much larger than others, but the dungeons that were considered much harder have since then been made more manageable. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I hope that this doesn't happen again in Dragonflight. Because even though I have seen some people uploading the fact that now the balance between the dungeons is much more even, you should not forget that this is week 6 of this patch. This is 1.5 months into the patch. This is not a good thing. Now that the dungeons are more even, the problem is still that it took 6 weeks for this to happen, right? Generally speaking, you would like to get this result at the release of the patch, not 6 weeks later. That's what I wanted to point out with this newly found balance in the Mythic Plus pool of dungeons compared to the start of the expansion. The start of the patch was a 1 out of 10 in terms of balance. Now we are at a 5.5 out of 10. Don't be the one who congratulates this situation because we went up by 4 points. We are now 5 times as good as before. Instead, still complain about it because it took way too long to get to where we are now. That was the thing I hope is not going to repeat itself in Dragonflight, especially given that just like now, we are going to be bringing all their dungeons up to Mythic Plus level. So I also hope that we don't get this PTSD incoming situation of Halls of Valor being unplayable for 2 months, and we have to go every week and make videos every week about a new patch bringing in new nerfs to Halls of Valor, going on for like 7 weeks before it becomes playable. Which, if you played Shadowlands from the start, first of all, I'm sorry, but also you might have remembered the difficulty levels at the time of Necrotic Wake and Sanguine Depths, for example. Those dungeons also had to be nerfed for like 5 or 6 weeks before they went down to be more in line with the rest. So I hope that this issue is not going to repeat itself in Dragonflight. So this is just going to serve as a warning, just so in case that happens, I hope not, but in 3 or 4 months I can then go back to pick this video again and say, Blizzard, I told you so, if we end up having this same problem again. One new thing I am positive about, not very positive, but at the very least I still think it's good. I would give it a 7 out of 10. It's the Professor's Chirpsnide's Impeccable Harpy Disguise toy. This is one of the new Disguise Transmog cosmetic change toys that you can get in Dragonflight. It comes from a side quest, a pretty funny, you know, hilarious type of flavor quest. And of course, the important part is that at the end of this quest, you get a disguise toy. The 7 out of 10 comes from the fact that this one has a 30-minute cooldown and lasts for 10. You know, that's where the 7 out of 10 comes from. Yeah, of course, it's not Kalaitha's hunting locket, okay? It's not a 30-minute disguise on a 15-minute cooldown like the spooky Night Elf model version of the toy. But still, 30-minute cooldown for a 10-minute duration, you know, 1/3 of the cooldown, you can use it as a disguise harpy, is decent. Not to mention that a harpy model is something that you rarely get as a disguise toy, looking like an harpy. So I think it's quite a good addition. You know, it's free, you know, it's not rare, it doesn't require grinding or luck or anything like that. It doesn't cost money, gold you have to buy from a vendor, from a rep vendor. It's just from a very simple side quest. So it's a good addition to my circle of cosmetic toys I use to change my appearance every now and again. Now, what we can finish the video with, rather than a piece of news, is more like a question, which is about, you know, alt friendliness, being able to play multiple characters at the same time, managing the grinding and the farming you will have to do on multiple characters based on professions, which, as you know, they are getting overhauled, they are getting revamped. There is a whole change ahead for the next expansion when it comes to professions, and there is one thing that might bring some debate around. The thing is that the new factions, the new reputation grind you have to do in Dragonflight is going to work like Renown. So just like your covenants, imagine the 4 covenants were 4 reps. Remove all of the annoyances between having to respec and change between them, and just imagine 4 different factions with 4 different Renown levels. This was justified by Blizzard so that you can get more rewards for your profession, an extended version of your leveling system. You know, once you hit max level, now you can start hitting higher levels of Renown, giving you some new tiny things every time you level up as an incentive to make it feel smoother. Now, while you start at 0 from each of your characters, all of your non-power gaining rewards are going to be unlocked for all of them. So, account-wide, TLDR. Everything that will have a Renown requirement, so things that will be given to you once you reach certain levels of Renown, like 10 or 15 or 20 throughout your progression, once you reach them on one character, you can then just hop in on your alt and go and pick it up already, even though you are Renown 2 with that faction. The thing is, what is locked behind Renown is armor, is gear, is weapons, fine, whatever. What is also locked behind Renown is going to be profession patterns, profession recipes, profession books and manuscripts for you to learn so you can understand how to better be at your craft. This of course means that you will still have to do the entire grind anyways. If you want, in this new expansion with a much more important role given to professions, if your main is a blacksmith and a jewel crafter, and your alt is a leather worker and an alchemist, and your second alt is a tailorer and an inscriptioner, then you have to grind every single faction if you need any of the recipes that they award you throughout the Renown levels, throughout the reward levels. So the equivalent of hitting Revered or the equivalent of hitting Exalted that gives you the juicy pattern or the juicy recipe, you still have to do that on every one of your characters. That is the question for today, whether or not it's okay or if it's a little bit too grindy. As far as my hope goes is I hope there is some sort of catch-up systems being introduced, i.e. if your alt reaches Renown 20, you get the bind on account item that makes leveling on an alt, that specific faction, 30% faster. And then you reach Renown even higher than 20, you keep going higher until you get better, catch-up systems, catch-up items to give to your alt to make it less grindy to reach that. I hope Blizzard is taking this into consideration to make alts leveling and catching up to their mains in these type of activities a little bit better, feel a little bit smoother. That's my take on this. Let me guys know what you think about this take, if you have no issue with grinding this, especially if it will feel good, you know, especially if it's gonna feel rewarding anyways. Perhaps you won't mind the grind for this type of reward. Still, I think it would be better overall to make it a little bit less grindy for repeat playthroughs on other characters. I think it should still be slower by default, just faster basically. With this being said, I'm going to leave you to the rest of your Tuesday because there's nothing else for today as we wait more and more news coming in for this new build of the Dragonflight Beta. Of course, as usual, we can thank together, of course, all of my Patreon supporters for allowing me to continue to produce WoW content as we go deeper into the Dragonflight Beta. You can also, for further support, like and comment down below, as well as subscribe to the channel itself. That will be greatly appreciated. And lastly, to finish, for further social interactions, you can follow me on Twitter, as well as subscribing to my Patreon right this way, I think, on these two links. With now this out of the way, there's nothing else to talk about. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys soon. And in the meantime, yes, I don't like it too. I don't like when I realize I am hungry and I have to eat, but I have to do something that I know will last for 3 to 4 hours. So, well, shit.